Good evening, TA students. It's Michelle Christie. I'm the Program Manager for Vocational Education and Training. I manage the Certificate for and Training and Assessment course here at Open Colleges. And tonight we have a Study Period 2 online tutorial. So I thought I would touch on learning styles and preferences tonight because I think it's relevant to obviously conducting training. So with my training session, not sure I'm there. With my training tutorials, I normally do a little bit of a presentation to start with. So I'll have everyone muted temporarily. But whilst I am conducting the tutorial, feel free to use the chat function in the GoToMeeting panel to ask any questions you might have. Once I've finished my presentation though, I will unmute everybody and we can have a discussion. You can ask me any questions you might have about Study Period 2, whether it be about the learning material or the assessments. You might be working on some activities, or you might just want to chat with other people or students, I should say, in Study Period 2 at the moment. So I'll start with this presentation and then I'll open it up. So tonight I'm going to be looking at the learning styles and preferences. I thought I'd draw your attention to the Certificate for and Training Assessment first. So there are different skill sets that you will learn throughout the course. So in Study Period 1, you would have done design, which is about using training packages and developing learning programs. You're now in Study Period 2, so that's why I've highlighted that in yellow. And you're learning about facilitating learning in the workplace and also delivering group-based training. From there, when you move into Study Period 3, you'll learn more about assessment. So you'll be learning about planning assessment activities, designing and developing assessment tools, and participating in validation. And Study Period 4 is about assessing competency. And then from there, you've got your elective units. So you only need to choose 2 electives. So whether you decide to do work skill instruction or mentor in the workplace, make a presentation or develop teams and individuals, any one of those 2, or you choose Study Period 7, which has e-learning and distance learning together. That's up to you. As I mentioned, Study Period 2 actually contains 2 units of competency. So we're learning about group-based learning and also facilitating learning in the workplace. To give you a bit of context into the assessments that are required in this study period, there are actually 5 assessments. So 2 of them are for workplace learning. One of them, in workplace learning, you need to conduct one-on-one training sessions with a learner in their workplace. Whereas group-based training is you need to conduct 2 training sessions for 40 to 60 minutes to a group of 3 or more, and then you need to conduct a group-based training session for a different group. Now, the assessments in Study Period 2, we have had a change, so we now have E0069C/01 and 02, and you do need to conduct training sessions with your learners, but you can also conduct initial and closure meetings. So I feel like the assessments that have been updated in workplace learning are a lot more streamlined than they used to be, and I hope you agree with me. For these assessments though, you must train adults, and if you are considering training anybody below the age of 18, I'd probably suggest to contact Helen, the trainer in Study Period 2, or Jess, our course coordinator, or myself, just to make sure what you are suggesting is okay. So tonight I thought we'd touch on adult learning, and also looking at different learning styles, because we all learn in a slightly different way, or we prefer to learn in different ways, I should say. So within the workbook in Study Period 2, it says that trainers need to understand how people learn so they can more effectively present information to their learners. The definition of learning is subject of some debate, and for the purposes, we actually define learning as acquiring skills, knowledge, and characteristics. How can skills, knowledge, and desirable characteristics be acquired best? The following description of learning styles will best explore. how the learning process can be used. I want to draw your attention to andragogy because the way that we learn as adults is very different to how we learn as a child. So Malcolm Knowles, and his picture is here on this slide, he actually put the definition or the theory of andragogy, and it's the art and science of helping adults learn. And Malcolm Knowles had a very specific idea of how students learn. And he actually suggested that there are a few different touch points in the differences. And one that when we are adults and we are actually conducting or learning, we need to know. Okay, so we don't just do learning because we're told to, it's because we actually need to know something. So you might decide tonight that you're wanting to cook a new dish and it requires a new technique to be used. Now, you would have to learn how to do that technique in order for you to cook your particular dish. Well, you would learn that because you need to know how to do it. Whereas if someone said to you, I would like to teach you about, something boring like workplace health and safety, you might not want to know that. So you won't learn what you don't want to know. We also have the learner's self-concept. So learners are aware of themselves when it comes to the learning. And they need to feel like they're acknowledged in their own learning experience. So when we're training, I highly encourage you to include group discussions, to include activities, to allow learners to reflect, because these activities let the learner feel part of the learning experience, and that's really important. They also have to be ready to learn. So if they're thinking, well, I wanted to study something, but I don't want to do it now, I want to do it next year, they have to be ready. So next year, they will learn. There's got to be an orientation to the learning as well. So they have to understand what's expected of them before they actually do learn. And they also need to be motivated. So I thought I'd touch on different learning styles. So one is the VAK, or visual, audio and kinesthetic learning style. And what this relates to is that auditory learners absorb information best by hearing. They're actually attracted to sound and prefer to hear things than read it, and they can be distracted by noise. I'm actually an auditory learner myself, and I really like to hear presentations, to watch videos and things, because I can hear the key information and start moving that through my brain and basically trying to sift through what's relevant to me. We also have visual learners, so they need to see what's going on. Okay, so these people are really, they will pay attention if they see drawings and graphs. Whereas kinesthetic learners like to do things, so they actually need practice. They want you to show you how to do something, so they might do a bit of a supervised practice, and you do a demonstration first, and then you're going to turn to the learner and say, right, I want you to practice that. That's how they learn best. So that's the VAK learning style. We also have PART, which is Honey and Mumford. They have 4 learning styles. One is a pragmatist, a reflector, an activist, and a theorist. So different people will learn in different ways. So a theorist will be in their element if they can relate it to different theories. They need to think about their actual learning. Whereas a reflector is all about matching. They're kind of looking, or thinking, I should say, more so about what they've just learned and how does that make them feel? How does it make them think? Should they will start thinking about what they're actually doing and potentially changing behavior. Then you've got your pragmatists, so it's all about the doing. They need that active experimentation. They need to basically feel out what they're trying to learn. And then you've got the activists, and this is a real concrete experience where they're actually kind of needing to feel the emotions or the look and feel of that concept or skill. Then you've got left and right hemisphere. So people will naturally think that they think in a different way. So some people say, I'm really analytical, I live in my left brain, or I'm very artistic and creative and I live in my right brain. Well, chances are you actually do use both sides of your brain, but you will probably naturally align one way or another. And at times, it does actually pay, if you're learning something and you need to be in a specific hemisphere, to actually spend about 5 or 10 minutes actually in the other hemisphere for the other. How do I explain that? Let's say I need to do something very analytical today. So I've got a report I need to pull and I need to play with a bit of data, and it's very analytical, very numbers driven. And it's going to take me a couple of hours to really drill down and be very analytical and do some data mining. Now, before I actually get into that, I probably should get into my artistic frame of mind. So I might, just to free my mind of anything else I'm thinking about, actually start drawing. Okay, and it might just be a little doodle. It doesn't matter what I'm actually drawing. It doesn't have to, I'm not a great artist in any way. But by flicking my brain into another way of thinking, then I can start clicking into my left hemisphere and really get analytical. And at times we have to give our brains a bit of a break. So it's good to flick into the other hemisphere, if that makes sense. Then you've got the global and analytical. So these are people who, global, they see the big picture. Okay, so they're this helicopter view. They can see what's going to happen from an organizational point of view, or they can see an entire concept and understand all the bits and pieces. They begin with the end in mind. Whereas you've got your analytics who, they have to be very detailed. They're kind of at the minutiae level, and they need to do things step by step. This is Kolb's 4-type definition of learning styles. So he had the accommodating, the converging, the diverging, and the assimilating. So this is kind of bringing together what we've just learned in the VAK model, but also bringing together the Honey and Mumford and Part model, where, and these do have similarities, where at times you might need to feel and watch, and other times you might need to think and watch, other times you might need to think and do, other times you might need to feel and do. So I think this model works quite well if I think about it with online learning, because there are going to be times where we need to change our style to suit what we're actually learning. And I think that comes back to my next slide, that it should be noted that every single person has different learning styles and preferences. So you might, like myself, I need to get my big ear out and I need to listen really carefully to some information for me to learn it. But that doesn't mean you or I can't learn in another way. So if someone shows me how to do something and asks me to do a supervised practice, doesn't mean I can't learn that way. I absolutely can. It just means that's not my preference. And there might be times where you might need to be asked to reflect, or you might need to be that theorist or an activist, or you might need to think in your left brain and you want to be a right brain. These are just your preferences. These are things that are, when you go to learn, they're your go-to. So if we kind of think about your favourite knife in your knife block, so in your kitchen, there's always a favourite knife you might use a lot of the time. It's kind of like that. But there's going to be times where you're going to need to use different knives to cut different foods. And it's the same with the learning styles. So whilst everyone does have a preference, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to use that style or align to that preference every single time. Everyone does learn different ways, and we're very adaptive as humans in that we can learn in different ways at different times in different contexts, which I think is really cool. So to help with different learning styles, you as a trainer should think about or understand how different people learn and what preferences they might have. Ideally, what you're wanting to do. So whilst it's important to know that information, the best takeaway you should take away tonight is to present your content in a variety of different ways. Okay, something that we notice with assessments that come in for this particular study period, a lot of people think that training is lecturing, and it really isn't. Okay, there are different roles that a trainer takes on. There's going to be times where you're the trainer, you're the facilitator, you're the lecturer, you're a coach, you're a mentor. You can't stick to one style all the time. If we present content in a variety of different ways, it keeps students on their toes, it keeps things interesting, it keeps them engaged. So there are going to be times where you need to mentor a student, where you need to increase the amount of activity that is included in content. There are going to be times where you're going to have to lecture, but it shouldn't be your go-to. So think about different ways that you can present information. Does it have to be a PowerPoint slide? Probably not. Could we use a whiteboard? Maybe. Could we use a flip chart? Absolutely. Could we get the students involved? Yes, we can. Think of different ways that you can actually present that content. And as I said, use a variety of activities over the session. So think about once you've done your housekeeping session, have an icebreaker, get people to know each other. You know, especially if it's a brand new course and these people or students don't know each other, really good to get connections going. Include group discussions, include activities or role plays or vignettes or world cafes. There's so many different training techniques out there, and you will learn over the next few years. As a trainer, there's so many different things you can be doing. So use a variety of activities over your session and also over the program. Don't try and do the same thing over and over again. Engage the learners with content and activities in different ways, and just acknowledge and value individual differences. As we said, Malcolm Knowles and his andragogy, students need it to be relevant, but they also need to be acknowledged. And I think that's the great thing about adult learning. Everyone has a different viewpoint. Everyone has a different culture, their background, their experiences in their workplaces and life. So different. If you can tap into that as a facilitator and start drawing different people's interests or opinions out into your training, it is going to enrich the learning program or that particular session in ways you might not even understand or know is going to happen. Now, if you're wanting to know a little bit more about learning styles and how to tailor your approach, here are a couple of websites that you might want to check out. And I'm going to open up the floor for some questions tonight. So you can ask me any question you like about study period 2, whether it be about the learning materials, you might be working on an activity or a formative assessment, or your actual portfolio assessments.
Well, hi Michelle, it's Rose here. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good, thank you. Really good. Thanks for that tonight. I think it was good just to sit and listen to that because I'm somewhat of an auditory learner too.
Ah, cool.
As opposed to just reading it. I think what I find difficult as well, it's not really difficult, but it's just something I'm aware of when I'm planning, say, a learning program.
Yeah.
Is thinking about activities that I like to do.
Okay.
Because of the way I like to learn.
Sure.
And having to find ways of thinking about other people and how they're going to learn. that can be a challenge, because sometimes I set things out and I go, oh, that looks great, I'd really like to do that, but other people are like, oh, that looks really boring, or that didn't explain things particularly well. So that's just one thing that I'm trying to do, as I do it, go over with a bit of a critical mind and reflect and think, have I captured everything? Because it's,
Sure.
I agreed with your point around it, having a variety of strategies within your teaching to be able to capture everybody's learning style and preferences.
And you might find that there's times where you've planned your session out and you have in your mind exactly what that session is going to do. So you start following the session plan, to the letter. And then as you're going through that session, you go, this isn't quite working with the learners. So there's going to be times where you're actually going to have to switch it up then and there in the classroom. It's a bit like improvisation. You get given a funny game to play and then you've kind of got to run with that. Training's a little bit like that as well. So there will be times where you kind of need to do things at that particular moment. But
yeah.
I get your point when it comes to training, because I know I love group discussions because I find them so enriching, and that really relates to my own educational philosophy. But not everyone wants to talk.
Yeah, and depending on the size of your group, and some people will shut down, whereas if you have them working in pairs or something, then they have a more of an opportunity to have a voice and share what they're learning too.
Absolutely. So I suppose for you, it's having a think about, well, yes, you would enjoy that activity yourself, but is that potentially the best way to do it? Could you potentially do it in a different way?
Yeah. So apart from that, I don't have any other questions. I can see there's nobody else attending tonight. I was just really wanting to hear what other people are thinking or struggling with or whatnot, but I don't have any other burning questions at this point.
And whereabouts are you still reading the learning content, or you're actually getting into the assessment?
So I'm getting into one of the assessments. So I've been working on one of the first assessments for workplace learning.
Yes.
Which is good. I'm an early childhood teacher. I actually manage a childcare centre. So my end game of doing the Cert 4 will be to teach future teachers, obviously, in the Cert 3 or diploma.
Great.
So I've got a gamut of guinea pigs who I can practice all my workplace learning on and things like that.
That's great.
And yeah, I tend to get through well, I've had a rough year. I've just applied for a deferment because my husband hasn't been well this year, but I tend to look at the assignments and get a bit overwhelmed because they're just so darn long. But I've just trying to go through them systematically, and I'm actually getting through this one. And I have looked, because I think I started them several months ago.
Sure.
But now that with the new ones, as you said, they're more streamlined. They do seem a bit more user friendly. So I'm getting through them quite easily, I think, this time around.
That one's been a real labour of love between me and Helen.
Oh, thank you so much, because I can see the difference. I really can.
It's the units of competency for TAE, they're very, very prescriptive, but at the same point, they're also kind of highly interpretive as well. And I know that sounds a bit weird, it's contradictory. But when Helen and I both look at workplace learning, we look at it very differently. See, I've worked in RTOs for 8 years, and a lot of the RTOs I've worked for, we have a lot of workplace training. So as a retail trainer, for example, I spent a lot of time moving from one shopping centre to another, and I would spend a lot of time going in one retail store and teaching them how to deal with customer complaints, and another time where I'd be going through visual merchandising techniques. So it's all very practical. It's always on the floor, and you need a lot of adaptability because distractions and things are going to happen in the workplace that you're not expecting. Whereas Helen kind of comes from workplace learning from a different point of view, in that she's looking at it from a workplace facilitation point of view, where you've got a new staff member and you need to put a plan together for their training development or professional development for the next, 3, 6 months or 12 months. And you would be sitting down with the learner quite regularly and checking in, seeing how they're going with different learning activities. And the learning activities might not necessarily be done by the facilitator. There's going to be times where a supervisor is involved, or a colleague, or you might have an external training provider come in. You might do some coaching with them. You might do a one-on-one session with them. So throughout that period, there's going to be different activities going on for that particular learner. And so we kind of got together and thought about how do we bring, marriage those two kind of different scenarios, because they're both very right. These are both workplace learning or workplace training. It's just in very different contexts. So I think we've got a really happy medium now. And we both really find we love these assessments.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, well, I'm getting into it and getting through it a lot more easily than I remember doing it last time. So that's really good. Yeah, that's good. So I think I'll just keep plodding on, and I know to contact you guys if I've got any questions as I go. But
message anytime. Helen is obviously a trainer for study period 2, and Jess is a coordinator. So they're both really responsive with messages. So never feel like your questions are silly or dumb in any way. We want you to have class.
No. Yes, everybody's support throughout the whole thing has been really good. So I appreciate that. So thank you.
I've got a good team. I'm lucky.
Yeah, you do. You do. Excellent. Good. All right. Well, thanks so much for that tonight, Michelle. That's great.
All right. We'll hopefully chat again soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye, Rose.